here's a little part 2 of my final project video. I'm gonna pick up at the physical growth changes in toddlerhood. So in years 2 to 3, a lot changes for the toddler. They lose their baby fat and grow taller and leaner because their bodies just don't need to retain so much fat to keep them warm. They're walking, they're running, they're climbing, their motor development is just insane. They can maybe be potty trained, they can eat like themselves with a spoon or a fork. In toddlerhood, the language they're starting to grow crazy. So at the beginning of toddlerhood, it might just be they're learning 1 or 2 words. They can use single words to tell you things, but later on in toddlerhood, it becomes much more complex. They're putting words together, they're forming sentences, they can comprehend what you're saying, and they just speak in a more complex way. Most of their gross motor skills are things like walking, running, jumping, playing. So toddlerhood does a lot. That's really whenever the key things are learned in life, of basic activities of daily living and just how to do life. Next, I'm going to jump into some parenting styles. So there's 4 different kinds, and there definitely are some that are better than others. So the ideal parent is going to be the authoritative parents. They have high demands and set clear expectations, but are loving and warming towards their children and respond to their needs and desires. That is the goal. That is exactly what we all want from our parents. An authoritarian is next. They're really high in demandingness and low in responsiveness, and expect demands to be followed without dispute. They show little love and often just say no with no explanation. So these are some of our more really strict parents. The permissive parent is the exact opposite. They're low in demandingness, but they're really high in responsiveness, and provide lots of love and warmth, but don't set a lot of expectations. Then we just have our disengaged parents, who are low in all of it. They don't show much love or warmth or much demandingness and expectations. So how you're raised and your parents and your culture all play into who you're going to become. So some different concepts that I'm going to talk about. I have some different definitions of the self and how people might feel about themselves, how people might see themselves. So let's start with self-concept. People's view and evaluation of themselves. This plays a lot into their self-esteem, which is a person's overall sense of worth and well-being. Then you have a couple different, so you have the actual self, which is a person's perception of the self as is. The possible self, a person's idea of self that it could potentially be. And the ideal self, the person one would really like to be. You have the feared self, which a lot of people have when they grow up in a more disengaged parent home, is the person one imagines is possible to become but dreads becoming. And then the false self, which is a person that may represent to others but doesn't represent what they are actually thinking or feeling, which is very common in today's society, especially in young adolescents. So in adolescence, the physical changes that are happening in puberty are crazy. So like I said earlier, this is really when the typical male and female characteristics really start to come out, because there's changes in body shape and maturation, and there's facial hair, there's breasts, there's bigger hips, there is growth of new hair under the arms and legs, just places that maybe haven't seen hair growth before. So there's a lot going on. There's also a lot going on in the brain development of young adolescents going through puberty, because they're having to have higher functions of brain activity, solving more complex problems. I have a list of a bunch of different definitions that will help us moving forward. So I'm going to go ahead and share those with you guys. So we have culture, which is the total pattern of a group's customs, beliefs, art, and technology. Ethnicity, which is a group identity that may include components such as cultural origin, traditions, race, religion, and language. Total fertility rate in a population, it's the number of births per woman. Your socioeconomic status is a person's social class, including education level, income level, and occupational status. Your genotype and phenotype. So your genotype is an organism's unique genetic inheritance, and your phenotype is the physical characteristics derived from that genotype. We have fluid intelligence, which is a type of intelligence that involves information processing abilities such as short-term memory, and crystallized intelligence, which is an accumulation of a person's culturally based knowledge, language, and understanding of social conventions. So let's get into some more moral development type things. So we have Kohlberg's theory of moral development. It says moral development is based on cognitive development on 3 levels. So we have the pre-conventional reasoning, which is the lowest level, which is more based on like egocentric perceptions. We have the conventional reasoning, which is more intermediate level, where we conform to moral expectation of others, so like rules set by authority. Then we have the post-conventional reasoning, which is the highest level, so we make individual judgments on like what is right or wrong. This moral development comes in a little bit later in life, around adolescence, in that age. Moving out of adolescence, let's go into emerging adulthood. So this is a time where we're really exploring our identities. There's a lot of instability, self-focus, feeling in between phases of life, and a lot of optimism and possibilities. During this phase of life, we really are into long-term relationships, and our focus is to find a romantic love. So we're going to talk about Robert Sternberg's triangular theory of love. There are 3 qualities of love: passion, intimacy, and commitment. Those 3 qualities can be combined into 7 different types of relationships. So the different love forms are liking, which is just intimacy; infatuation, which is just passion; empty love, which is just commitment. Then you have romantic love, which is going to be a mix of passion and intimacy. Then we have compassionate love, which is both intimacy and commitment; fatuous love, which is passion and commitment; and lastly, what everyone aims to have in life is consumate love, which is all 3 aspects. Unfortunately, in the process of picking that loved one, there may be some STIs in the process, which are infections transmitted through sexual contact. A couple examples of these would be like syphilis, chlamydia, HPV. Some are more severe than others. Some are not a big deal at all. They can be fixed. Some are lifelong. So that is a huge part of, life and wanting to be careful. So after we do emerging adulthood, like we said earlier, we go into young adulthood, middle adulthood. When you're in middle adulthood, your body experiences things sort of in a way of adolescence in reverse. We, as women, go through menopause, usually in your 40s or 50s. Your hormones will drop significantly. You'll have hot flashes, headaches, weight fluctuations, mood fluctuations. It's a pretty hard time, but also in this time of life, you're really coming to peace and you're reaching your peak, as they would say. Your career's set, your family's set, and you're just enjoying life. Then you phase into late adulthood, where you really function in a different way. So this starts in your 60s and goes all the way to 85 plus. Obviously, there's different levels of functionality between 60-year-olds and 85-year-olds. So the younger you are, the more you're still able to do, whereas the older you get, the more your cognitive abilities and even physical abilities will start to fade and fade and fade. Until we get to Kubler-Ross's theory of death and dying. Unfortunately, we're at death and afterlife at this point. There's 5 stages that occur in the acceptance of death, which is denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. But the great thing is that in late adulthood, you have so much wisdom to share, so much expertise, so much love, and it's really just a slower paced life at that point, and you get to really enjoy what you've done your entire life and the seeds you've sown. So in conclusion, the lifespan. There's so much going on from the second you're conceived to the second you die. So much physical and cognitive growth that is just unmeasurable. As much as we try to research and do, there's so many things that take a role in who you become, and that's your culture, your religion, your parents, where you grow up. Really just such an individual experience. So thank you for listening, and I hope you learned something.